There has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michelle Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 202, Requests versus Demands. You know, today's podcast subject was sort of planned for later on in the summer, but it has jumped up in the queue. I wasn't planning to talk about it this week, but I've been getting a lot of questions on Voxer about relationships and communication, specifically on the subject of speaking to people about veganism or plant-based diets. And if you didn't know that you could Voxer me, that's not surprising because I am the world's worst at using this podcast to explain to you how you can work with me. But anyway, that's hardly surprising. I never mention it. So in the show notes, you'll be able to see a link. I'm pretty sure it's there. Voxer. It's a messaging app, and you can send me a text or a voice message any time of the day or night, and you won't be interrupting me in any place, anywhere on my end. You could be in any time zone, and then I can answer you when I've got a minute. And boy, I get a lot of really intelligent, interesting questions over on Voxer. And I use Voxer with a lot of people. I use it with former clients. I use it with people who are just interested in thinking about how life coaching tools can help them in the day-to-day world of being vegan and vegging their best. And I use it with lots of people, especially if they're not on Instagram. I get a lot of messages on Instagram, and I'm trying to use LinkedIn more. If you are on LinkedIn, would you send me a request? I would love to be your LinkedIn buddy. I get lots of messages there, and I haven't really been taking it as seriously as I should. Facebook, sorry, not going to happen. There's just too much nasty hacking and fake messaging over there. So if you have ever tried to contact me on Facebook, I apologize because I probably completely did not talk to you, did not respond, because I cannot get through all the fake messages there that say they're reporting me for crimes against Facebook. So anyway, sorry, over on Voxer, some of you have been experiencing some higher temperatures meteorologically and also interpersonally with people who are they're not being very helpful to you on your vegan or plant-based journey. So, of course, since all of this information and coaching is relevant in any area of struggle or stuckness in your life, you can fill in the blank with your challenging relationships this summer as we talk about requests versus demands. Now, before we get stuck into it, I noticed in my own thinking about it today as I was preparing, I noticed I don't talk as much about relationships on this podcast as I do when coaching one-on-one. And I was thinking about why that was the case. And it is for sure because when I talk about relationships to you out there in the world, wherever you are driving or walking or doing your laundry or listening, I don't know you necessarily. And I really don't know your partners or your in-laws or your coworkers or neighbors or the people that you have to deal with in your day-to-day life. Obviously, I do not know the details of the people who are difficult for you in your life. So anything I say about human beings in your life on this podcast, it presupposes one thing. We assume that the other person is essentially a decent human being who you actually want to have in your life in one way or another. Okay? Because if the other person is violent or abusive or untrustworthy or dangerous to you in any way, this is not about that, right? In those cases, I think you should be seeking support personally and legally to protect yourself. If someone has zero interest in you and your well-being, this is not about that. In those cases, I think your job is not to communicate differently or better with them or get them to understand you or value you. It's probably your job to minimize or end contact with them. Now, maybe you think this is obvious, but so often when I talk to any group about relationships, I get pushback. I get pushback like, you just don't get it, Michelle. This person is toxic or narcissistic or abusive or emotionally unstable. And there's, in my opinion, no point in you trying to make yourself better understood in a situation like that, right? You want to be looking for ways to be as physically and emotionally safe and to distance yourself. And I see no need to prioritize your vegan or your plant-based journey to a person like this, okay? So when we're talking today about communicating requests versus demands, we are only talking about people who are essentially respectful, decent people. Otherwise, honestly, who cares? Who cares, right? Spend your energy on people you want in your life who basically care for and respect you. So the distinction we're talking about today between requests and demands is very helpful in good relationships, basically good relationships, where there is also a difference of opinion or of culture or of behavior. And I think it's super important in most cases for effective vegan advocacy. And this difference between a request and a demand, it can be used in a variety of situations on a variety of topics. And I think it's always good to keep it in mind in general, but I do think it will significantly enhance your ability to advocate persuasively and create positive change for you in your real life. So let's get to it. In nonviolent communication, which is sometimes called NVC, requests versus demands, a request is defined as an expression of a preference, a need, or a want that is made in a respectful, non-threatening way and leaves room for the other person's choice. A request is a way of asking for support without demanding it or making the recipient feel guilty or emotionally blackmailed in any way. And on the other hand, a demand is a statement that presents an ultimatum and leaves little or no room for free choice and is often accompanied by some sort of threat or attempt to control the behavior of another. Now, I'm sure you are not threatening anybody violently, but this doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be a financial threat. It can just be the threat of pouting, rolling eyes, mocking, sulking, or withdrawing closeness, shutting down. Demands are seen as barriers to communication, as barriers to connection, and I recommend that when you notice that that's what's happening, that you avoid it. So, requests. Requests always sound clear and specific, and they use basically positive action language, what you do want. They are non-coercive. They leave room for the other person's opinion or choice, and they are expressed respectfully, without threats, without guilt. Demands are stated with an implicit threat of some sort of punishment, some kind of ultimatum that will leave no room for the person to make a clear choice and just move on. And these demands are often accompanied by an attempt to control the other person's behavior, even if it's done for the best of reasons. We've all had that feeling, right? Even when somebody's really got a good idea, a good plan, and we feel controlled, it's a bad feeling. Now, how does this distinction help you if you are a vegan advocate or you're just someone who is hoping to get a vegan option or a plant-based option? Making requests instead of demands can create an atmosphere where people are much more receptive to new ideas or to ideas that they have dismissed or diminished previously. Requests are less likely to trigger the defensiveness that gets people to just shut down, and it allows for more productive conversations about veganism and what made you change in what you consume. It builds connections. Requests focus on mutual respect, on finding some common ground. And that is an approach that helps advocates connect with people on a personal level. And it makes that message for others who maybe have never, ever thought about it or have always assumed that vegans and plant-based people were fringy, strange, different. It makes your message more relatable and impactful. A request encourages the listener's autonomy, which is crucial when discussing lifestyle changes like veganism. This approach of making a request, it makes the situation more open for the person you're speaking to consider and maybe even try on the concept of adopting a vegan practice voluntarily, even in a small way. Understanding the difference between requests and a demand, it allows you as a vegan advocate, as someone advocating for you on your maybe early vegan journey, to craft your message in a way that's more likely to be heard. And for example, what's an example? Saying something like, well, you've got to stop eating all these animal products. Maybe you might say something like, would you be open to trying some of the vegan alternatives I've found? Something as simple as that. Asking for permission to discuss what's important to you. Requests allow for small, manageable steps, and this incremental approach is, well, it's why I call this podcast Veg Your Best. It's why I do what I do the way I do it. I find incremental approaches often are much more effective than demanding other people's immediate drastic change. Some people have the wherewithal to change tonight. Tomorrow will be a completely vegan life, okay? That does happen, not for most of us. And also, using a request is a statement that you value the relationship, that you can discuss a subject where there is no current agreement without straining the personal relationship. And this is very, very important when you're talking to friends and family. Yes, you might say, but they're not giving me the same respect. Sometimes you have to go first. And clear, specific requests are so much more likely to inspire a concrete action. If you ask someone to try a meatless Monday, you're likely to be greeted with more openness than demanding that they go vegan. Because what does that even mean? It takes time for people to even get their heads around all that's involved there. And it avoids defensiveness. Demands, whether you are fielding a demand from someone else or whether you are demanding someone think about your what's important to you, this triggers us. It triggers a need for our own autonomy, and it very often involves us rejecting the other person's message to protect our own freedom. So please try to remember that a request is a way of avoiding this pitfall of keeping conversation open and productive, investing in that relationship, because I guarantee you are much more likely to be treated the way you want to be treated and to encourage other people to lean into your messaging if you invest in the relationship. So, vegan advocates, people who are advocating for themselves to find vegan options, please, we should all be focusing on making clear, specific requests that respect others' autonomy and encourage open dialogue. So this is what I mean. We're talking, I think we all know what a demand sounds like, but a demand, for example, if you're encouraging a friend, you want them to try vegan food and you say, you really need to stop eating all that meat. It's the only ethical choice. Don't you care? You love your dog. Pigs are more intelligent than dogs. Industrial animal agriculture, you know that. It's devastating for the environment. It's a much bigger deal than not using plastic straws. So what do people hear when we've said that? None of which is particularly wrong, but those statements imply that the person you're speaking with must comply. Otherwise, they're maybe uneducated, unethical, hypocritical, and that's not a good look. So another way of requesting this would be something like, would you be willing to try a vegan dish if I made it for you? I think you might really enjoy it. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you don't. And I was skeptical too when I first tried eating plant-based. In this situation, the subtext of the statement is respect for the friend's autonomy. It's an invitation for them to try a dish without pressure. It acknowledges that they might not like it, and it fosters just much more open, positive interaction. And it also shares where you yourself may have been slow or resistant to change along the way. So another statement people might, want to compare is, you have to stop buying animal products. It's hurting the planet and the animals. Well, that's kind of a statement that leaves no room for discussion. It leaves no room. And it leaves people defensive. It leaves people resistant. If there's a situation that you feel is really immediate that you need to speak about, what about, could we talk about the impact animal products are having on the environment? I'd really appreciate it if you would consider reducing the consumption in our household. In this way, you open dialogue, you show respect. And in general, you may say, well, no, I've already tried that. Then keep trying it. Keep trying it, because a demand will pretty much not work. So it doesn't mean a request will work. We don't make the requests for the other people to do what we want. We make the requests because that is how we advocate for ourselves. That's how we live our own lives. That's how we model for the younger people around us. That's how we model making conversations and making requests in a family or a community or in a workplace. So I think I can hear two of you muttering, oh, really, Michelle? Should I make a request like that about murder maybe, or violence? Just request that people not kill or hurt children or set fires? And should I just acknowledge their sovereignty to do whatever they think is right? Would you suggest that I just live with a murderer and not mention it? This happens when I talk about relationships, and I refer you back to the top of the podcast. We're talking about people that we care about. We're talking about people that you live with for good reasons, because they are family members or friends, or they're people you work with, and they are people who currently may not or may not yet have come to see the issue of eating animals the way you have. Because not only is eating animals currently not illegal, it is actually ubiquitous. It is widely considered in our culture necessary, normal, natural, and even nice. So you can obviously do as you like, but as an advocate, my job is to try and help you live a healthy, happy, engaged, connected vegan life, even if your choices stay in the minority where you live for the time being. Because my job is to keep you from giving up being vegan, right? My job is to keep you making those choices, plant-based choices, to keep making them even when not everybody is on board, because that's what I do. That's what most of the people I know who are committed vegans, committed plant-based eaters, they are not living in an ashram surrounded by people who agree. Okay? So that's who I'm here to support, and I want you to advocate for yourself and also not give up because nobody else is on board. So, I'm not expecting you ever to be silent about your beliefs on this or on any issue, but I don't think most of us want to demonstrate what can be seen as violent or contemptuous language or behavior to the people that we care about, or to anyone for that matter. And nonviolent communication is one of those ideas to keep in mind when we're advocating for ourselves in our homes, in our communities, in our places of work, for our own sake. Now, I'm not saying to be all wavy gravy and it doesn't matter and we need to protect the feelings of everybody who don't agree with us, who don't eat plant-based, who aren't on a vegan journey. Even somebody as passionate and committed as former guest on the podcast, Dr. Melanie Joy. Dr. Melanie Joy, whose episode continues to be the #1 most downloaded episode of Veg Your Best. Dr. Melanie Joy has made a specialty in how we can communicate effectively on ethical issues, and I always refer you to any of her many books and presentations, but I want to end the episode today with a small snippet from her book, Powerarchy, Understanding the Psychology of Oppression for Social Transformation. Dr. Melanie Joy writes, quote, "If we want people to respond to requests for positive change, we must make such requests in a way that honors the dignity of those being challenged, while nevertheless raising awareness of the problems they've caused and holding them accountable for those problems. Of course, some people in some situations respond to being shamed by making positive change. However, it is likely that such a response is in spite of, rather than because of, having been shamed." That's Melanie Joy from Powerarchy, Understanding the Psychology of Oppression for Social Transformation. Now, if you grew up in my day, shaming children was pretty normal and even thought of as being responsible because we're trying to make kids do the right thing. But they were often shamed into doing, quote unquote, the right thing. And I do think in most of our lives, child rearing has changed for the better. But I believe now we've got so much shaming and name calling on social media and in politics. And at the very least, I don't find it to be effective. So I repeat, Dr. Melanie Joy wrote, quote, "Some people in some situations respond to being shamed by making positive changes. However, it's likely that such a response is in spite of, rather than because of, having been shamed." So wherever you find yourself with disagreement or awkwardness in the conversations that maybe you're dreading this week, I'd like you to notice when you find yourself making a demand rather than a request. Whether it's about plant-based eating or veganism or anything, notice when you have made a demand. And notice maybe if you have some time to reframe that demand into a request. And also notice when others are making demands of you instead of making a request. You know, sometimes, and when I say sometimes, I mean always, sometimes this is easier to see in other people, and it's easier to own when it's not on a highly emotional subject. So feel free to practice with boring issues. Now, if you want more coaching on this, Voxer, right? Remember, Voxer. I'm Michelle Olander, or on Voxer you can find me MOLEND 293. MOLEND 293. Or, of course, you can email me or DM me on Instagram. All my links are in the show notes, and we can brainstorm for a few minutes on how to reframe a demand as a request. Not for them. Really, not for them, but for you. I want you to be heard. I want you to be effective and happy on your plant-based journey, in your vegan advocacy, and in every aspect of your life, so that you can get out there, this week and veg your best. Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.